O27, Standard O, Lionel FasTrack. Is there any way to make these different track systems connect together? The answer is yes, and I'll show you how in this episode of Toy Train Tips and Tricks. Hello again, this is Mike with Toy Train Tips and Tricks. And before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's video, I want to send a shout out to all of the new viewers and new subscribers that have come on board lately. Welcome aboard. And I want to give a quick kind of recap as to why I do this channel and what the inspiration was. So in addition to giving me something to occupy my time during the COVID shutdown, what I was finding when I was visiting various three-rail message boards online was a lot of folks had some what seemed to be very basic questions, things that once upon a time was kind of common knowledge in the hobby, but over the years has kind of passed on as people have moved, more towards, the Bluetooth and command control. Some of the basics of conventional control have been lost to the ages. And so rather than going in and answering each individual comment on the message boards as they came up, I thought, well, since I've answered this question a dozen times already, why don't I just make a video? And that way I can just show people the link and say, here's how to do it. And so this knowledge goes on to the new generation of modelers. And that is the inspiration behind this particular video. I've been getting a lot of questions both in the comment sections of my own videos and also seeing on other message boards, questions about connecting different types of track. And yes, there is an easy way to connect O27 to O to FasTrack in any combination of these three. I'm going to show you the easy way to do it. So it comes down, first of all, to the track pin. Now, what is the purpose of the track pins? Well, they basically have three purposes. One is to kind of keep the track sections together for your temporary layout, and they do this to varying degrees of success. Secondly is to align the different pieces of track together so that obviously the wheels can go from piece to piece without derailing. And then thirdly, they provide electrical contact from one to the other. So as long as we accomplish those goals, we can use alternate methods of putting them together. So first, let's start with the easy one, connecting O and O27. And for this, obviously, we have two different sizes of rail. One is much bigger than the other. So all you do is you use the pins of the O27, the smaller pins, insert that into the O gauge track, shim the O27 to the right size. You can use wood, cardboard, paper, Legos, whatever it takes to get it roughly the same size. And at this point, you've got your alignment, but you're missing the structural connection, and the electrical connection is probably intermittent. So as far as the structural connection, the easiest way is if you've got this hooked up on a permanent board, you just screw the pieces down and you're ready to go. If you're trying this on a temporary layout, maybe try zip ties running around the ties from this section to this section. Should hold it pretty snugly together. Or around from here to here. Just make sure that your square connector on the zip tie is off to the side so it doesn't sit on top of the ties and possibly cause interference with some of the rolling stock. And so basically there you are. You take the smaller pin, insert it into the larger track. You've got it aligned, you've got it shimmed, and then the third part is power. Because this is intermittent power at best because of the smaller rails, you just have to make sure that you've got power feed going to this side and a separate power feed going to this side. Whether you choose to do that with separate lock-ons or separate power feeds or just running jumper wires across the gap, whatever it takes, as long as you have power. So pins, shims, and power, and you can connect O and O27, no problem. But what about FasTrack? So let's look at FasTrack to O. Now, both Lionel and Menards do make transition sections to get you from the O to the FasTrack. But honestly, you don't need to buy anything special. You just need a section of FasTrack and a section of O. So first, looking at the pins, the choice of pins, you don't really have any choice because the FasTrack pins are permanently attached to the track. They're bolted in there. And without getting in there and cutting them out, these are the pins you're going to use. So you notice that they're a different shape and also different size than your standard O. But remember that our 10-plate track is somewhat malleable, vocab word for the day, malleable, and that it's easy to bend into different shapes. So you take yourself a small slotted flathead screwdriver, you insert it into the end of your track, and you just take this part and you just widen it so that you see I've changed the shape and the size. Instead of being round like this side, it is now kind of this shape, which matches up to the shape of the pins on my FasTrack. I need to do this a little bit for the center rail, not so much because of the size of the pin, but because the FasTrack pins are designed to go side by side as you attach different pieces. It's a little bit offset, and so in order to make room for that offset, you do have to widen the center rail opening just a smidge, not nearly as much. And then I can leave the opposite side as is. So I widen this one quite a bit, this one a little bit, and this one, leave it alone. Then I'm just going to slide the pieces together, give it a little extra oomph. There we go. Okay, now it's not going to go all the way, but we do have a connection here. Now, what about this huge gap in the back? Well, that is easily solved with an extra track pin. Let me grab my standard O track pin over here. We're going to insert that into the side of the track that we left alone. And as we push this together, it will fill in our gap. We've got our alignment. We don't have to worry about shims because these are the same height. Don't have to worry about that. And then as far as power, again, this is not the greatest connection, especially here in the middle. So you will need to run jumper wires from one to the other. And again, find some way to secure it so it doesn't go anywhere. Although this connection actually is just about as tight as the standard O to standard O because of shoving this pin in here. Now, there is a slight difference in the contour between the FasTrack and the O. This should not cause a problem for 99% of our equipment because of the deep flanges in our 3-rail wheels. If you do have a problem, again, our track is malleable, and so that's where you'll take your end nippers, go around the outside, and just kind of squeeze this O-gauge rail so that it's nice and tight against the FasTrack rail, and so that there's not a significant flare there. So just adjust it to fit if there's a problem, but there really shouldn't be any more than, just an audible click as it goes from one type to the other, especially over this one. Now for O27, it's a similar concept, but because the O27 rail is smaller still than the O, you need to do a little bit more work. So again, you pop this into the end, wiggle it back and forth, and you see I've got it pretty wide here. This is a piece of Marx, but it works on Lionel too. And by taking my screwdriver and straightening this out, I've got roughly the same contour as the FasTrack. And again, the center rail slightly widened it and leaving the other outside rail as is. And if I slide this together, I can slide it right onto the FasTrack. And again, I've got this huge gap, but never fear. Here comes our track pin. Insert. Push it all together. Now, the track is together, but there's a height difference, so we need to go back to our shim method like we did with the regular O track and shim it together. And of course, again, if you've got a way to permanently attach this to a board, you're going to be in better shape than with a temporary layout. But still, you can go from O27 to FasTrack to O, O27 to O, and any combination of the three. No problem, nothing else to buy, a few simple tools and some track pins, and then just be willing to run jumper wires for your electric and you can combine these track sections no problem. And just to prove my point, let's run a caboose across it. No problems whatsoever going from any of the track sections to the others. So again, for the FasTrack going to the standard O, you can purchase, one of the transition pieces either from Menards or from Lionel, but honestly, you don't need it. So nothing else to buy, and you can combine these pieces of track to work for your layout, whatever you need to do. So there it is. As always, I hope you liked the video. If you do, please like it, share it, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a question that you have about other things O-gauge related. Maybe it'll inspire me to make another video. But tell your friends, tell your neighbors, and we'll see you next time on Toy Train Tips and Tricks.